Hi, I'm Caleb Foster, a 25-year-old junior architect. If I could sum up my journey so far, I'd say it's a constant search for acceptance in a world that often doesn't seem to make sense. After years at a major architecture firm, Skyline Architects in New York City, where competition was fierce and oppression a constant, I moved to this mid-sized city, Portland, Oregon. Here, at Luminarch Studios, a welcoming, brightly lit studio, I feel like I can finally breathe. The smell of fresh paint and cut wood mixes with the anxiety I still carry. In the office, the routine is marked by meetings and deadlines, but the presence of my supervisor, Eleanor Vance, makes everything a little more challenging. Eleanor is an imposing figure, 32 years old, admired by everyone for her competence. She moves with a confidence I honestly envy. Her eyes, always focused and intense, almost mesmerize me. However, her firmness is intimidating. It's hard to tell if she's an ally or just a demanding supervisor. As I organize my desk, a mix of nervousness and excitement settles in my chest. Today is the day for a collective project presentation, and the idea of exposing myself to Eleanor's criticism terrifies me. I hear my colleagues' murmurs and memories of the past resurface. Those times when I was the target of jokes for my shy and insecure nature. But here, things might be different. The new team values creativity, and I want to show that I'm more than just the guy who hides behind a computer. I exchange nervous glances with Eleanor during the meeting. She reviews the projects with a surgeon's precision, and I feel my heart pound when she finally turns to me. "Caleb, why don't you present your work to us?" Her voice is firm, but in her gaze, I notice a spark of curiosity that encourages me. With a trembling hand, I flip through the pages of my project, each one representing not just my effort, but also a part of me. Here's the concept I developed for the co-working space. The idea is for people to feel connected, even in a work environment. As I speak, I feel the energy of the room shift. My colleagues start to pay attention, and the tension in me dissolves a little. Eleanor watches, and for the first time, I see a slight approval in her serious gaze, but soon that feeling is overshadowed by a thought. She will never see me as an equal. At the end of the presentation, Eleanor asks some incisive questions, and although I try to answer confidently, the resurfacing insecurity is undeniable. As soon as the meeting ends, I feel a mix of relief and frustration. I don't know if I managed to impress her, but the way she observed me left me intrigued. There was something more there, something I couldn't decipher. As I tidied my desk, ready to leave, a wave of unease washed over me. What did the future hold? Eleanor, with all her strength and power, felt like a distant yet utterly fascinating figure. One part of me yearned to know her better, while another recoiled from the sheer vulnerability that might bring. After all, I'd sworn to myself I'd never let myself get hurt again. Yet, deep down, a whisper insisted it might be time to break free from the past, to open myself up to new possibilities. It was then I realized something in my life was on the cusp of changing, something that could perhaps lead me to sketch out a future I'd always secretly yearned for. The routine at Luminarch Studios settled in fast, and still, I felt a bit like an outsider. A trespasser in a world that seemed so perfectly organized and secure. Each day was a blend of intense work and that nagging echo of insecurity, a shadow that had trailed me since those dark days at Skyline Architects back in New York. I'd watch Eleanor with a knot of admiration and fear. She was the supervisor everyone looked up to, a born leader who seemed to have all the answers. But there was something beneath that controlled facade that kept me utterly intrigued. I remembered a conversation with Dan, a colleague, who'd told me how Eleanor had become such a powerhouse in the field. She doesn't leave room for mistakes, you know. You might think she's tough, but it's only because she never wants to see anyone fail. That really made me think about Eleanor herself. Her seriousness often made me feel small, yet at the same time, I'd catch glimpses of small acts of kindness that hinted at a human side few people ever saw. The way she'd pause to really listen to a distressed colleague, or her genuine concern for everyone's deadlines. It showed there was a woman beneath that steel armor. I, on the other hand, carried the heavy burden of a past that still haunted me. Flashbacks would surface unbidden, dragging up memories of that toxic work environment at Skyline Architects, where every misstep felt like impending humiliation. The harsh glare of fluorescent lights, the once friendly voices of colleagues morphing into malicious whispers, the critical stare of my old boss, all of it still echoed loudly in my mind. It was in that place I'd learned to silence myself, to hide away. But now, each passing day at Luminarch Studios brought me small victories. The new team genuinely valued my creativity, and I was slowly, tentatively, starting to feel like I could actually be heard. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a project, bathed in the soft glow of the sunset streaming through the large studio windows, Eleanor walked in and came straight to my desk. "Caleb, do you have a moment?" My heart instantly leaped into my throat. It was the first time she'd ever spoken to me so directly, without the usual formality of meetings. "Of course. Can I help you with something?" My voice betrayed a hint of my insecurity, but I tried my best to project confidence. "I wanted to hear your ideas for the public space proposal we're developing. Your co-working project brought a new perspective, and I want your thoughts on integrating it with Washington Park." What she said surprised me. Was Eleanor seeking me? A wave of heat ran through my body, and I approached her desk, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. The conversation flowed, and I grew excited talking about creating a space not just functional, but also a community refuge. Eleanor listened attentively, and as I spoke, I noticed a subtle smile form on her lips. "You really care about this, don't you?" she commented. And then I realized Eleanor wasn't just the rigid supervisor everyone thought. There was a passionate spirit behind that facade, a spirit that somehow I also recognized in myself. That day, returning home, a new hope filled my heart. The daily routine at Luminarch Studios seemed less oppressive. Eleanor was more approachable, and I started to imagine a future where our interactions could be different. But I also knew there would be challenges. The age and position difference between us was an obstacle that couldn't be ignored. Eleanor was admired by the team, while I still fought to establish myself. It wasn't just hierarchy. It was the vulnerability I feared. Days passed, and the tension in my mind intensified. I recall one night alone in my loft, surrounded by plants and my own drawings. Loneliness enveloped me like a heavy blanket, and my mind drifted between fantasies about Eleanor and the harsh reality of what our difference meant. What could happen if I let these feelings carry me away? The fear of failing again paralyzed me, but then I realized that maybe Eleanor also carried her own insecurities. Another day, during a coffee break, I overheard her talking with a colleague about a project that had failed in her previous career. "It was difficult. I thought I'd never recover," she said, with a distant look that revealed a fragility she didn't usually show. I remembered the phrase that had echoed in my mind. Sometimes you have to break with the past to draw the future we truly desire. That conversation made me understand that Eleanor, like me, was also fighting her own battles. As I watched her, something began to form inside me, a desire to get closer, to know that side of her few saw. And at the same time, the idea that maybe I could be the one to help her embrace vulnerability. The future remained uncertain, but one truth shone through. I had to break free from my past and truly open myself to this potential new reality, professionally and emotionally. With each interaction, the path ahead grew more palpable. The connection forming between us was about to face its trial. But those small exchanges of glances and smiles were clear signs of a shift. It felt like the crucial first step to breaking down our barriers. A week after our public space discussion, an unexpected event changed everything. A technical glitch in the presentation software forced us to reschedule. Eleanor was furious. I'd never witnessed her like this. The tension in her face and her clenched fists made it clear we needed to act fast to avoid disaster. The thought of being forced to work together over a weekend was, for me, both terrifying and intriguing. Saturday morning, I arrived at Luminarch Studios with a knot in my stomach. The office atmosphere felt heavy, yet a subtle expectation hung in the air, as if everyone hoped our collaboration would somehow succeed. Eleanor was already there, looking ready for a fight. Sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating the cluttered desks and project board. The air was thick with tension, but also a nearly palpable electricity, hinting at what might come. "Good morning, Caleb," she said, her voice cool, direct, but with an underlying flicker of expectation. "Did you bring your notes?" "Yes, right here," I replied, trying to stay calm. My heart's thumping seemed to echo across the studio as I arranged papers on the table. The paper sliding against the wood was the only sound filling the silence. As the day progressed, we began to work. Our interaction was intense. Eleanor challenged me with sharp questions, and I tried to match her energy. With each idea I presented, I saw her eyes brighten slightly. "Those are good suggestions, Caleb. You truly understand what we want here," she said, and I felt like I'd just received an award. The atmosphere, previously charged and tense, began transforming into something collaborative and engaging. As the day advanced, the work grew lighter, and suddenly a more personal conversation started. The tension that always existed between us began to dissipate, and the physical closeness became more palpable. "Have you always wanted to be an architect?" Eleanor asked, reviewing a graphic I had created. "Actually, no. I grew up where art wasn't exactly well regarded. But in college, I realized there was something magical about architecture," I replied, unable to contain my emotion, speaking of my passion. Eleanor watched me silently for a moment, and her voice softened. "It's interesting how life leads us down unexpected paths. I've had my moments of doubt too. Sometimes it feels like I'm always trying to prove I'm good enough." Those words hit me hard. There was something so genuine beneath the strong woman I saw every day. I could feel her struggle, and it pulled me even closer. "You are more than enough, Eleanor," I said, and our gazes met in a way that seemed to promise more than just a professional partnership. The atmosphere grew more intimate. Our hands accidentally brushed while handling a tool, and a jolt went through me. Eleanor hesitated as she looked at me, but in that instant, the line separating the professional from the personal seemed to have dissolved. As night drew closer, the air around us shifted. We started sharing stories of fears and frustrations, and the vulnerability that once felt like a burden now transformed into a lightness. "Caleb, you are different," Eleanor commented with a smile. "I feel like I can be more authentic with you." Those words imprinted themselves on me. In a moment of courage, I leaned a little closer. "I feel that too, Eleanor. You have this way of inspiring people." In that instant, the tension between us intensified. Eleanor leaned towards me, and on impulse, I lightly touched her arm. The touch was soft but heavy with unspoken meanings. Our gazes locked, and for a brief moment, the world around us disappeared. It was just the two of us, caught in a silent dance of emotions and restrained desires. Then, in an impulsive act, I drew a little closer. "Eleanor," I began, but my voice failed me. Uncertainty weighed on me, yet there was a burning flame of hope. The moment was intense, and I knew something was about to change between us. In that brief instant, intertwined in vulnerability and sincerity, we knew we were starting to explore new territory in our lives. It was an audacious step, but a necessary one. A step that would lead us to a future we both desired, even if we didn't quite know what it would look like yet. That night, after that moment heavy with meaning, the Luminarch Studios felt like a battlefield between what we desired and what the world around us expected from us. We left the office, but the tension still hung in the air, like a delicate thread about to snap. The walk to my apartment in the Hawthorne district was a whirlwind of emotions, and I wondered if Eleanor was also thinking of me in the same way. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts intertwined, and the longing for what could be grew stronger and stronger. The next day, waking up was a challenge. Sunlight streamed through the window, but the light felt dimmed by uncertainty. What we'd done the night before could have changed everything. At Luminarch Studios, the atmosphere felt different. There was a palpable expectation in the air, but also a deep apprehension. Eleanor arrived, and I watched her walk in. She seemed perfectly composed, her hair in an impeccable bun, and a blazer that exuded her authority. But in her eyes there was a glimmer that told me she too was acutely aware of what had transpired between us. Our first interaction was abrupt and formal, a return to normalcy that left me deeply uneasy. "Caleb, we need to review the project again," she said, her voice firm, but I noticed a slight tremor in the hand clutching her tablet. "Of course," I replied, even as my heart hammered in my chest. During the team meeting, the tension between us was undeniably palpable. Each time our gazes met, a flicker of shared memories ignited, yet we both struggled to maintain a professional facade. The weeks that followed felt like navigating a minefield. Our encounters were filled with quick exchanges and nervous smiles, but nothing that could compromise our standing at the office. I remember one particular day when we were going over the blueprints for a new project. Eleanor was deeply focused, and as I spoke, I noticed her lips moving silently, as if she were mentally repeating my words. Before I realized it, an involuntary smile touched my face, and Eleanor caught me staring. The silence between us then was charged with an undeniable electricity, a current that simply couldn't be ignored. One afternoon, as we reviewed the blueprints, Eleanor turned to me and said, "You're quite an interesting person, Caleb." The candor in her voice took me by surprise. "Why do you say that?" I asked, trying desperately to conceal the burgeoning hope within me. She hesitated for a moment, as if searching for the perfect words. "Because you're not afraid to be yourself. I truly admire that." Her words warmed my heart, but they also brought to the surface a new fear of what this could truly signify. I was starting to see Eleanor not just as my supervisor, but as someone who could genuinely be a partner. Yet her vulnerability made me question what I truly wanted. What would it take for us to finally take that next step? That night, I decided I absolutely needed to talk with Eleanor. I set up a meeting at the Daily Grind Cafe, just a stone's throw from Luminarch Studios in the Pearl District. The place felt warm and inviting, with soft lighting and a relaxed atmosphere. As soon as she arrived, she seemed a little nervous, but at the same time, there was a quiet determination in her gaze. Our conversation began lightly, yet soon enough, that familiar tension became undeniably palpable once more. "Caleb, Eleanor began, her voice trailing off, hesitant. "I think we need to discuss what happened that night." Her words struck me like a bolt of lightning. I honestly didn't know what to expect. "Yes, about that," I replied, struggling desperately to maintain some semblance of calm, but my heart was violently pounding in my chest. She kept going, her voice laced with such raw vulnerability. "I feel like we have something special, but we also know we're in a really tricky spot. You know what the crew thinks about this, right?" As soon as she said that, the stark reality of our situation just crashed over me. That power dynamic between us, the whispers, the office gossip and judgment from our colleagues, it all felt like this immense weight, keeping us from ever really moving forward. "I get it, Eleanor," I managed, my voice just barely holding steady. "But I can't just ignore what I feel for you. What happened between us was real, and I feel like we could explore this, if you're willing." Her eyes softened then, and for a fleeting second, it truly felt like all those walls between us were finally about to give way. "I feel it too, Caleb. It's so confusing and honestly terrifying. But I can't deny there's this profound connection between us," Eleanor admitted. "But you have to understand, this could really mess things up, and I can't let it interfere with our careers." There was this raw sorrow in her voice, and it hit me then that her fear wasn't just about being perceived as weak. It was about losing everything she'd worked so hard for over the years. "I don't want anything to mess with your career, Eleanor, truly, but I also don't want to lose this chance to explore what we have. We could try to keep things quiet, discreetly, and if it doesn't work, we move on. No professional repercussions," I offered, feeling her own vulnerability, kindling a fierce courage inside me, a willingness to risk everything. Eleanor just sat there for a beat, lost in thought. The sheer weight of our decision seemed to press down on us both. "What you're suggesting is so risky, Caleb, but maybe it's worth trying. I don't want this to stop us from being ourselves," she finally said, her eyes now burning with a quiet determination. And then that small, hesitant smile touched her lips. And in that instant, I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated hope. In that precise moment, something deep inside me just clicked. A real, tangible possibility stretched out before us. This connection between us wasn't just some fleeting fancy. It felt like something profound, something that could utterly transform us. The future was still a foggy, uncertain mess, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was ready to face all the risks, because even if it all went sideways, the journey itself with her would be undeniably worth it. That conversation, it really did mark a brand new beginning for us. We started finding little pockets of time, meeting in discreet spots, always far from the team's prying eyes. Every single one of those encounters was this incredible blend of laughter, raw confessions, and moments of utter vulnerability. We learned to share not just our deepest dreams and fears, but even the tiny, mundane things from our daily lives that somehow made us feel so incredibly alive. With each passing day, our connection deepened, and the already blurry line between our professional selves and our personal feelings became almost invisible. But of course, there was a price. The constant, gnawing fear of being discovered echoed in both our minds. Other people, our colleagues, they started to pick up on the subtle tension between us. Quiet comments, curious glances, they all began to surface, and the pressure just kept ratcheting up. Yet with every single challenge we faced, my resolve, my absolute determination to protect what we had, it just grew stronger. It was a new chapter, and as challenging as it was, I knew we were ready to face whatever came. The love we were building was a powerful force, capable of leading us to a future we had never imagined, a future that wouldn't be easy, but one I wanted to explore alongside Ellie. As the days passed, our relationship grew more intense, but also more complicated. While our meetings became more frequent, the tension in the studio escalated. I started noticing curious glances from colleagues, and hushed conversations in small groups seemed to swirl around us, though no one dared to address the subject directly. The pressure of keeping what we had a secret grew heavier by the day. One day, during a meeting, the atmosphere shifted. Ellie and I exchanged discreet yet intense glances as we discussed the project's progress. Then, a colleague, Kyle Jenkins, cut into the conversation with a malicious comment. "Ellie, you and Caleb seem quite chummy lately." don't you think? The room fell silent. Ellie's smile vanished, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. What should have been a professional moment transformed into a minefield. Ellie straightened up, her expression hardening. "We're just working together, Kyle. Let's focus on the project, please," she replied, her voice firm. I felt my heart race, a mix of shame and anger churning inside me. The tension in the room was palpable. I wished the floor would just swallow me whole. After that meeting, Ellie and I found ourselves in an isolated corner of the studio. "I'm sorry, I don't know what he was thinking," I mumbled, struggling to find the right words. "It wasn't your fault, Caleb," Ellie replied, but her gaze was distant. "We need to be careful. If this continues, it could jeopardize both our careers." A profound sense of helplessness washed over me. What we were building felt real and significant, and the fear of losing it left me utterly anguished. In the days that followed, Ellie seemed more reserved, and I felt her pulling away. Our furtive meetings became less frequent, and when they did happen, they were marked by a heavy silence. The joy that once permeated our moments together began to be replaced by a gnawing anxiety. One night, I couldn't bear it anymore. After a tense day, I sent Ellie a message. "We need to talk." She replied quickly, agreeing to meet at the Daily Grind Cafe, our usual spot. When I arrived, I could see the worry etched on her face. "Hey," I said, settling across from her. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine, just a bit worried," she replied, her gaze fixed on the bottom of her coffee cup. "I feel like things are getting complicated. What happened at the meeting left me shaken." "I'm so sorry about that. I don't want what we have to turn into a problem. You mean so much to me," I said, trying to convey the raw sincerity I felt. She met my gaze. "I worry about it too, Caleb. What we're doing isn't simple. The hierarchy difference puts us in a really difficult spot. But I don't want to lose you, Ellie. What we have feels special, worth fighting for," I said, my voice rising a bit, a raw edge to it. Ellie sighed, a mix of frustration and sadness in her eyes. "You don't understand, Caleb. It's not just about us. This could hurt the team, my job, everything. I can't let that happen." A wave of desperation washed over me. So what are we going to do? Just let it die? It felt so good, so real. She lowered her gaze, clearly struggling with her own emotions. "Maybe we should reconsider this. We need to be more professional." Her words hit my heart like a blade. "If you truly think we should stop, I'll respect your decision, but know that I'm willing to fight for us." Ellie looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw her barriers begin to crumble. "I don't want this to end, Caleb. I like you, but we need to be cautious." That conversation felt like a turning point. While nothing was truly resolved, there was a new clarity between us. We decided we'd keep seeing each other, but under more discreet conditions, avoiding anything that could raise suspicion. The following week, we did our best to maintain our composure in the office. The tension was still there, a constant hum beneath the surface, but we saw each other whenever we could, exchanging subtle messages and meaningful glances that spoke louder than 1,000 words. Each encounter felt special, even brief, and the connection between us continued to deepen. Still, the pressure mounted. Whispers started to ripple among colleagues, and curiosity about our relationship morphed into outright speculation. One day, a co-worker, Chloe Davis, approached me directly. "Are you and Ellie together?" I froze, my mind scrambling. "What? No, of course not. We're just working together," I stammered, trying to sound calm, though my heart was pounding. She smiled, a hint of malice in her eyes. "Careful, Caleb. People are starting to notice. This could be a problem." Fear coiled and tightened in my chest. What we were doing could be exposed at any moment, and that could mean the end of both our careers. Each day, the insecurity transformed into a crushing weight I wasn't sure I could bear. That night, after an exhausting day, I decided to send Ellie a message. We need to talk again. Urdil. When we met at the Daily Grind Cafe, the atmosphere between us was heavy, tense. What happened now? She asked, her voice laced with worry. I'm starting to think it's impossible to keep this a secret. What we're doing could be discovered at any moment, and I don't want it to hurt us, I said, my anxiety echoing in every word. She sighed, running her hand through her hair. I'm worried too. The pressure is mounting, but I don't want to give up what we have. So what do? I asked, despair growing in my chest. We need to be more careful. Maybe we should limit our meetings to more discreet places and avoid any behavior that might raise suspicion, Ellie suggested. Fear was etched on her face, but there was a determination in her voice that encouraged me. All right, we'll do it. I don't want anything to come between us, I replied, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. In the days that followed, we did our best to remain discreet, but the tension between us didn't disappear. Every glance and every touch became laden with meaning, and the need to be together grew more and more intense. When we finally managed to meet in a secluded park, the feeling of freedom was palpable. We talked about our dreams and hopes, and the connection between us strengthened. I want to build something with you, Caleb. Something real, Ellie said, her eyes shining in the sunlight. I want that too, Ellie. Together we can face any challenge, I replied, holding her hand. The idea of a future together seemed closer than ever, but the fear of being discovered still lurked in the shadows. As our connection grew, I knew we would have to face even greater challenges. The love we were building was strong, but the outside world seemed determined to pull us apart. The only certainty I had was that I was willing to fight for Ellie and for what we had, no matter what lay ahead. The following weeks became an emotional battlefield. The pressure of keeping our relationship a secret was reaching a critical point. The atmosphere in the office grew heavier, and every furtive glance we exchanged seemed to echo with the weight of expectation, not just between us, but also among our colleagues. The fear of being discovered became a constant shadow hovering over our heads. One morning, as I was reviewing some documents at my desk, Ellie approached, her gaze tense. We need to talk, she said, her voice low and urgent. My heart raced in my chest. The last thing I wanted was for her to be pulling away. Sure, where? I asked, trying to hide my anxiety. Outside, in the garden area. It's more discreet, she suggested, and we headed to a small area covered by plants. As soon as we arrived, the atmosphere grew heavier, as if the air was charged with tension. Caleb, I'm hearing whispers. People are starting to suspect us, Ellie said, her face a canvas of worry that mirrored my own growing dread. We need to figure out what to do before this blows up in our faces. A cold knot twisted in my gut. I know, Ellie. What do you even think we can do? Are you saying we should call it quits? The question felt like a physical wrench, and my voice wavered, betraying all my fears. No, I'm not saying that, she quickly assured me, her eyes softening slightly. But we do need to be more careful. What we have feels incredibly special, I know, but we absolutely cannot let it derail our careers. I can't afford the optics of being seen as someone who plays favorites, not with my position. I get it, Ellie. Believe me. I don't want this to hurt either of us, but the mere thought of calling it off, it paralyzes me, I confessed, trying to sound calmer than I felt. Couldn't we just be more discreet, keep meeting on the down low? She let out a long sigh, her gaze distant, as if weighing every word before it left her lips. Maybe we should consider making our relationship public. If we keep playing this hide and seek, it's just going to get harder and harder every single day. The thought of going public sent a jolt of both intense relief and sheer terror through me. Part of me, a deep, yearning part, desperately wanted what we had to be out in the open, acknowledged. But then the cold reality of our hierarchy, the whispers, the judgment, and the potential fallout, it just made my stomach clench. What if it all goes wrong, Ellie? What if people just don't accept us? I asked, my voice laced with a worry I couldn't hide. I don't know, Caleb, Ellie admitted, her eyes fixed on the floor for a moment before snapping back to mine. But I feel like this is becoming unsustainable. We can't live like this, in constant fear, letting it control our every move. Her gaze was unwavering, firm and resolute, and deep down, I knew she was absolutely right. Still, the sheer prospect of putting our relationship on display for the entire studio, for the world, it stirred up a profound uneasiness within me. If we truly decide to do this, then we need to be damn sure we're ready to face whatever comes our way. I don't want this to professionally damage either of us, I stated, trying to find some common ground, some way to protect what we'd both built. Me neither, she affirmed, a spark of resolve in her eyes. Let's talk to the team. If it all goes sideways, if it blows up, at least we'll know we faced it head on, that we tried. Her voice, though still tinged with apprehension, carried a new, fierce determination. The day we'd agreed on for the team talk arrived far too quickly. Ellie had set up a meeting, ostensibly to discuss our current projects, but the true purpose hung heavy and unspoken in the air. The studio buzzed with an odd, nervous energy, and I could practically taste the tension, thick and suffocating. As the meeting progressed, the project slides finally faded, and Ellie took a deep, visible breath. She turned slowly to face the assembled team, her expression a careful mask. "Everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor I felt deep in my own chest. "I'd like to address something important. Caleb and we're in a relationship." Her words hung suspended in the sudden, absolute silence, a ticking time bomb. The ripple of whispers when it finally broke was almost deafening, a visceral reaction that made my ears ring. "How is this going to affect our work?" Someone from the back of the room, Kyle probably, cut through the din, his question laced with an immediate palpable anxiety that instantly poisoned the air. "We are absolutely committed to maintaining the highest professional standards, keeping our personal relationship entirely separate from our work. Our priority, as always, remains the success and integrity of this team," Ellie responded, her voice a steel-edged declaration. But even through her resolute words, I could see the narrow, skeptical eyes of a few colleagues, a silent testament that their distrust, for now, stubbornly remained. From that moment on, reactions were mixed. Some colleagues seemed to accept her, while others expressed concern. There was discreet gossip, but also support from some who admired Eleanor's courage in exposing herself. As the days passed, the atmosphere at the office grew tense. Some colleagues started treating Eleanor differently, and I realized things wouldn't be easy. The question that tormented me most was, would this decision bring us closer or drive us further apart? Eleanor and I tried to maintain our professional routine, but the atmosphere felt different. I constantly felt like I was under a spotlight, and the pressure to impress the team while navigating our relationship left me drained. One evening, after a particularly rough day, I decided I needed to vent. I found Eleanor at the Daily Grind Cafe, a spot we used to frequent. She looked visibly tired, but seeing me, a smile appeared on her face. "Hi," she said, her gentle tone bringing a little comfort. "Hi. We need to talk about all this," I said as she sat across from me. "I know. I'm worried too. What we're going through isn't easy. But you're still here. That means a lot to me," she replied, her eyes shining. "It means a lot to me too, but the pressure is making me anxious. I want this to work, but I can't shake the fear that it will all end in disaster," I confessed, feeling the weight of my emotions. Eleanor leaned forward, her hands holding mine. We're going to get through this, together. We need to be strong for each other. What we have is valuable, and we can't let other people's opinions tear us down. In that moment, I realized that regardless of the difficulties, our love was a powerful force. I was still scared of what the future held for us, but I was willing to face any challenge, as long as we were together. Eleanor was more than a supervisor. She was my partner, and even with all the uncertainties, I wouldn't trade her for anything in this world. So, we decided that as we faced the challenges ahead, we would continue to fight for what we had. Love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice, and I was ready to choose Eleanor every single day. The months following that pivotal conversation were an emotional roller coaster. The office dynamic had shifted, and we all had to adapt to a new reality. Eleanor and I were determined to show that our relationship wouldn't interfere with our professional capabilities, but the truth was, the pressure and speculation were always there. Initially, some on the team were supportive, admiring our transparency, but soon, whispers and snide remarks began to fester. One day, absorbed in a project, I overheard two colleagues in a corner, chuckling and making sarcastic jabs about Eleanor and me. Those words cut deep. I knew we needed to be strong, but it was truly agonizingly hard to ignore what others were saying. Eleanor was also grappling with the relentless pressure. Despite her strong exterior, I could see the subtle signs of stress on her face. Even as she tried to maintain composure, some nights, back home, I'd find her lost in thought, her gaze distant. "How are you truly holding up, Eleanor?" I'd ask, deeply worried. "I'm fine. Just processing everything," she'd reply. "The team has their eyes on us, and I don't want it to derail what we have." But I could feel the immense heavy weight in her words. We both desperately wanted things to work, but what was once a light, promise-filled connection now felt burdened by expectations and daunting challenges. One evening after another long day, we decided to meet at Luca's Trattoria on NW 23rd Ave. The soft lighting and delicious aroma of tomato sauce enveloped us, and for a moment, everything felt almost normal again. "You know," I said, swirling my pasta, "maybe we should plan a trip. Something to distract us, remind us of what we truly have outside this chaos." She smiled, a flicker of delight. "A romantic getaway. That sounds wonderful." Her enthusiasm was contagious. I realized we both truly missed those simple, joyous moments. "Yes, a weekend somewhere truly tranquil, far from curious stares and work pressure," I suggested. "We could head to the coast or mountains, somewhere no one knows us." Eleanor agreed, and we started making plans. The idea of escaping, even for just days, brought new life into us. The expectation of that dedicated time together gently soothed some anxiety. When we finally locked down a date, a profound relief and excitement truly washed over me. In the week leading up to our trip, I felt we were more connected than ever. The stress seemed to recede, lighter moments became a precious refuge. Eleanor and I exchanged tender messages, planning every detail of our journey. Finally, the day arrived. The moment we pulled up to the coastal cabin retreat in Cannon Beach, the waves and fresh breeze instantly brought a profound sense of liberation. The scenery was stunning. As we stepped inside the cabin, Eleanor turned to me with a wide, radiant smile. "We're here, finally, a bit of peace," she exclaimed. And I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming surge of gratitude. In the days that followed, we explored the beach, went on hikes, and spent hours talking under the stars. Every laugh, every gentle touch, felt like a soothing balm for our weary souls. Our connection deepened even further, and I realized that despite all the challenges we faced, what we were building felt strong enough to weather any storm. On the last night of our trip, as we walked along the moonlit sand, Eleanor stopped and looked into my eyes. "Caleb, I want you to know I don't regret anything we've experienced. "You are an important part of my life, and I'm willing to fight for us," she said, the sincerity in her voice making my heart race. "Me too, Eleanor. Being with you has made me realize that love is worth it, even when there are risks. No matter what others say, I choose you every day," I replied, holding her hand and feeling the quiet strength of our commitment. That night, under the bright stars with the soft sound of the waves in the background, we held each other, feeling that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we were ready to face them together. The trip wasn't just an escape, it was a potent reminder of what truly mattered, the love we had built and the unwavering determination never to let adversity pull us apart.